For the first time, the Iron Curtain is begun to part, and Hungary, your great country, is leading the way.
President Bush salutes change in Hungary. He gets a salute from the people of Budapest.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting again tonight from Budapest, Hungary. Good evening. Signs of changing times. The Hungarian parliament is still officially under the red star of communism. Many Hungarians, though, can't stand it, can't wait until it's off of there. And George Bush was in here today to help them try to do just that. An American president nudging and nurturing Hungary's movement toward Western political and economic freedoms. George Bush preaching democratic values today at a Budapest university named for Karl Marx.
It was President and guest lecturer George Bush. He got the attention and the approval of his audience at Karl Marx University.
You stand on the threshold of a new era of economic development and, yes, political change. And I believe with all my heart that you are ready to meet the future.
Offers of some U.S. investment money and freer trade with Hungary were received well enough. It was the offer to send Americans to teach English here that seemed to get the highest marks at Karl Marx. Up to now, learning English has been a luxury. Learning Russian was mandatory until just this year. The audience was friendly inside, the crowds were friendly outside.
After his appearance at the university, President Bush made an unscheduled stop inside this market.
This well-stocked market is part free enterprise stalls, part state-owned.
Very good.
What President Bush saw as he walked around this market was a tremendous variety of consumer goods for sale, many more than you see in the Soviet Union, Poland, or for that matter, anywhere else in the East.
But in some ways, this market is not a true picture of plenty. Fact is, many Hungarians we spoke to can't afford to buy much here.
And then we buy cabbage and things like that, and I only have one meal per day. Everything is very expensive.
At the parliament here in Budapest, I asked Hungary's new prime minister, Harvard-educated Miklós Németh, about those complaints from the people in the marketplace.
These people who are suffering from the high inflation rate are sometimes are against the reforms. That's a real problem.
So you're looking for more incentive?
Yes, more incentives that they can make more money. That's very important.
You think you can do that?
Yes, step by step.
But if I am a party official and
yes,
I already have
probably
certain advantages, I'm not interested in entrepreneurship. I like what I have.
That's right, but we tried this way. We know the results. Everybody knows the results. The Stalinistic model has failed.
On a trip filled with symbolism, this is the standout one of the day. George Bush was presented with a piece of the Iron Curtain, removed recently from Hungary's border with the West. A symbol all the more fitting this particular day, a U.S. announcement tweaking Mikhail Gorbachev. The U.S. will formally propose tomorrow, 2 months early, NATO's proposals for reducing U.S. and Soviet conventional forces in Europe. Joining me now inside the beautiful Budapest State Opera House is CBS News White House correspondent Leslie Stoll. Leslie, George Bush tweaked Gorbachev, but not one word of criticism in public.
Nor in private, I'm told. In his meetings today with the Communist Party leaders in Hungary, he felt compelled to assure them that he had no desire to do anything destabilizing to Gorbachev, that he was hoping Gorbachev would succeed at perestroika. These leaders, both in Poland and in Hungary, have somehow let George Bush know that they don't want him to do anything that's going to upset Gorbachev's future, because he is the first Soviet leader to allow reform and independence in these countries. And they want George Bush to help him. They don't want him to do anything that might hurt his survival. And George Bush decided on this trip to go along with their wishes.
Oh, but naturally, they're communists. But does this mean that George Bush now is going to give Gorbachev a free fire zone and never answer back?
Absolutely not. It is not an accident that he chose Hungary today to make the NATO announcement, which is, as you just said, a little tweak. It really basically tells Gorbachev to lower the number of troops in Hungary and Poland and the other Eastern countries. This competition is always there, whether George Bush verbalizes it or not. It's central. It's on George Bush's mind. It's on the world's mind. And today's proposal sends a message to Western Europe that George Bush wants to stay on the offense here.
We talk about sweeping changes in Eastern Europe, but when a president of the United States comes to a country such as Hungary with a deeply entrenched Communist Party and says, I'll help you, what does that say about changes in our country, our attitudes, and in George Bush's own policy?
He also told Jaruzelski in Poland, the man who put Solidarity workers in jail, that he'd help him if he was running the government. It is a new policy. George Bush is willing to work with communist leaders. If he had come to Hungary and attacked the Soviets, these people would have loved it. They hate the Russians, but he's chosen not to. And it's consistent with his policy on China. He's chosen not to go after the leaders there. He's decided that he'll work with the communist leaders as long as they show they're willing to make change, both politically and economically.
If that's true, by any reasonable analysis, we are deep into détente too.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Thanks, Leslie. I'll be back in a moment with other news of the day, and then more from Hungary. As our special coverage continues of the President's trip and the new face of Europe.
This awful itch. Won't anything stop it fast?
Lanacaine will. Lanacaine shuts off the itch like a switch, instantly. Look, Benadryl can't. Cordaid can't. Hydrocortisones can't. Only Lanacaine cream actually quiets the itch nerves that cause every itch, instantly, on contact. So for the fastest relief of every itch, get Lanacaine.
Lanacaine does shut off the itch. Like a switch, instantly.
Feel your oats with Post Oat Flakes. Feel your oats with Post Oat Flakes. Golden toasted flakes with whole grain oat nutrition and a crunchy oat taste. Feel your oats with Post Oat Flakes.
Following up on our report last night about dissident Chinese fugitives in Europe, in Paris today, exiled Chinese student leaders unveiled a replica of the Goddess of Democracy sculpture that was destroyed by Chinese troops in Tiananmen Square. At a news conference, they appealed for support from President Bush and the leaders of 6 other industrialized nations who hold their annual economic summit this weekend in Paris. They called on them to impose economic sanctions and cancel all high-level contacts with Beijing's communists. On the Chicago Board of Trade, the world's largest futures exchange, traders today sold off contracts for millions of bushels of soybeans. They acted as exchange officials moved to head off what one analyst called the biggest market play since an attempt to corner the silver market a decade ago. From Chicago, Gary Reeves reports.
It's being called the biggest crisis in the commodities markets in a decade. The Chicago Board of Trade today moved to keep an Italian company from cornering the soybean trade. Prices plunged as the exchange put a lid on the amount of beans a company can hold. Sources say Ferruzzi SPA, a huge Italian agricultural conglomerate, had hoarded 30 million bushels of soybeans in the last year and a half.
I believe that they were trying to take advantage of what they saw as a tight situation and a way for them to gain market share in the cash business.
Ferruzzi controls so much of the total market, there was fear a shortage would drive prices up, and Ferruzzi would make a killing selling off its stockpile. Ferruzzi issued a statement saying it broke no rules and that it needs the soybeans to satisfy legitimate customers, especially the Soviets. The company called premature the Board of Trade order that no company can hold more than 3 million bushels of July soybeans as of Tuesday. While some applaud the board's actions, others see it as another blow to its image. Earlier this year, FBI undercover agents alleged shady practices by traders here.
Anything that affects the credibility of the marketing system that we use, it can't help but have a negative impact.
This soybean play has been compared to the Texas Hunt Brothers bid to corner the silver market in 1979. They lost more than $1 billion. In this case, the big loser could well be the American market if it's seen as acting against foreign competition. Soybean prices fell by more than 5% today, and they are expected to continue to drop as more details of Ferruzzi's market play become public. Gary Reeves, CBS News, Chicago.
Congressional leaders warned the Pentagon today that the world's most expensive warplane, now under development, may wind up as no more than a museum piece. David Martin covered the hearings on the B-2 stealth bomber.
The stealth bomber is continuing tests in preparation for its first flight later this week. But today, members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, told Air Force officials they will not get the $8 billion a year they want to begin full-scale production.
$8 billion a year on one weapon system. There are only 12 countries in the world that have annual defense budgets that are greater than $8 billion a year. I mean, is this conceivable that we're going to do this? No chance. No chance.
And when the chairman tells you that politically you're not going to get $6, $7, $8 billion a year for this one weapon system, you can put that in your pocket and take it to the bank.
The Air Force unveiled charts showing the stealth bomber would actually consume a smaller percentage of the defense budget than the B-1 bomber, and that it would render $320 billion the Soviets have invested in air defense useless. But still, members of the House Armed Services Committee questioned the need to spend so much on defeating Soviet air defenses when a young West German flew a Cessna all the way to Moscow undetected. They were also skeptical of claims the B-2 could be used for conventional missions, such as the raid on Libya.
Please don't tell me you're going to fly a $600 million airplane against a $1 million bridge in Libya.
The Air Force warned that if Congress tries to save money by slowing the stealth program down, it will only drive the overall cost of the program higher, making the sticker shock even worse than it already is. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The Communist Party chief of Leningrad was fired today in a move engineered by Mikhail Gorbachev. Leningrad party leader Yuri Solovyev was rejected by the voters in recent parliamentary elections. Yesterday, Gorbachev flew to the Soviet Union's second-largest city to personally look into political problems there. And today, a special meeting was called to dismiss Solovyev from his post. In his first sanctioned statement since he was imprisoned for life 24 years ago, Nelson Mandela today said the South African government must negotiate with the African National Congress to bring, quote, peace to our country. He said the question of his release from prison is not an issue at this stage. The statement was distributed by the prison system just a week after Mandela held an unprecedented meeting with President Botha. Now I'll be back in a moment from the streets of Budapest. Unfold here on the streets of Budapest. There remain even now grim reminders of 1956. You can still see the bullet holes here. The signs of the rolling thunder of Red Army armor, tanks crushing Hungary's movement then to break free. The flickering images were black and white on American TV back then, but people here remember the smell of gunpowder and death in the air. The blood was red and real. Bernard Goldberg reports on the haunting of Hungary, the hopes of '89, the memories of '56.
It's not just that Budapest doesn't look dark and dreary in the East European communist style. It's that Hungarians actually feel freer than anyone else in the Soviet bloc. But 33 years ago, in the eyes of the Kremlin, the Hungarians went too far. It was heresy. The Hungarians were declaring their independence from Moscow. Khrushchev was not amused. He sent the Red Army to Budapest and 2,500 tanks. His message? No uprisings, no more revolutions, not here, not anywhere in the Soviet bloc.
And the tanks came this way to the parliament.
Miklos Vásárhely was there in 1956, part of the Hungarian government that was crushed.
What did you think? You see that the bridges are blocked by Soviet tanks. Soviet tanks are out in front of the parliament.
Well, I knew that this is the end, and I was prepared to be shot in 1 or 2 hours.
A lot of his friends were shot. He went to prison and lived to see a new revolution.
33 years ago, a lot of people died, was later persecuted, hanged, put in prison because they wanted a perestroika and they wanted this freedom, which now seems to be natural in the Soviet Union.
That's a sad irony, isn't it?
Yes, it is sad irony.
33 23 years after the uprising, this is the summer of Hungary's vindication. 3 months ago, the Soviet Union began pulling its troops out of Hungary after 3 decades. Last month, Hungarians finally were allowed to rebury the heroes of the '56 revolution. Men who had been executed and dumped into unmarked graves, face down. And you can even read about all the reforms. They don't have censorship here anymore. Miklos Hrasti is a Hungarian writer whose works were banned here until this spring.
Today's freedoms are coming because the Communist Party is collapsing and is not able anymore to keep discipline. Communism is a historic span which comes and goes, is the moral from the story of Hungary after '56.
Comes and goes, and now it's what?
It goes. It does go now.
Those are not simply the predictable words of a dissident. Just about everybody here believes that Soviet communism is politically obsolete, economically unworkable, and morally bankrupt. Miklos Shukhurst is a political activist. His mother was almost executed for working with the freedom fighters in 1956.
I think that the most important message is that tanks can't crush freedom. I think that in the free world, in the Western world, there are certain trends which people can't avoid anywhere, nor in China, neither in Poland, nowhere on earth. Towards freedom, free enterprise, free liberal democracy.
Where does that leave the communist world?
It leaves communism dead.
But the Hungarians understand that too many changes too quickly may be too much for Moscow, even in this era of Gorbachev.
Hungary and Poland have had their Tiananmen Square massacres earlier, and we have learned that democracy in a communist system should be built in a very cautious way, because they really have all the weapons and they can get mad very easily.
There are winners and losers in every revolution. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out which is which. The Soviets won the battle in 1956. More and more, it's looking like the Hungarians are winning the war. Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, Budapest.
In a moment, more about the meaning of this summer of vindication for Hungary. A country with deep problems, but with vast potential for transforming itself and Eastern Europe.